So let's now connect everything, and for this in the frontend index.js file, I now really want to send a HTTP request when the form is submitted. So for this here, I will use that fetch function, and now we need the URL to which the request should be sent. Now, since we will target this API route, the URL will be our current domain, and then just /API/feedback. We don't need to encode our current domain here, because if we start with a slash here, this will automatically be appended as an absolute path right after our domain. So it will be sent to the same domain automatically. And then there to the path /API/feedback, targeting that feedback file here. Now we want to configure this request though, and set the method to post. This is very important so that we send a post HTTP request, because of course we're looking for these kinds of requests here in our API route code. Then we also need to add our body, so the data that should be appended to the request. And we do this with the body property. Now that data should be an object containing the entered email and feedback, and it should be an object with an email and a text property, because that's what we're trying to access inside of our API route. So here I'll then just create my request body object, let's say, with an email property of entered email and a text property of entered feedback. And then that's the body I want to set here, but not as a standard JavaScript object, but instead converted to JSON with help of that JSON stringify method. Now we should also make it super clear that we're sending JSON data by adding some special header with help of the headers property, which takes an object, where we add the content type header, so a key of content type added to this header object, which is set to application JSON. And my key name is wrapped between single quotes here because I have a special character in this property name, which wouldn't be allowed otherwise. So now we add this object to add metadata to this request which we're sending, informing the backend, informing the API route in the end, that this request will carry JSON data. That is required for the API routes feature for Next.js, therefore, to correctly parse the incoming request body and convert JSON to JavaScript for us so that we can conveniently access it as we're doing it here. So that's how we send this request now. And then here we can also listen to the response and extract the JSON data from that, and then work with that data and maybe just console log the data for the moment. So we're just sending the request, and then for the response, we're just extracting the data and then logging the data. Using the then methods here because fetch returns a promise. With all that done, if you save everything, you should be able to go back to your page and then enter any data of your choice here and click Send Feedback. And now to find out whether this worked, we can go to the feedback.json file, and in there you should now have an array which does contain one object with an ID property, which is set to some automatically created ID, email and text with values being equal to the values you just entered here. So that was now updated automatically because of our API route code here. And if I send another feedback like does this work again from test2@test.com, if I click send feedback and we have a look at feedback.json again, we see now that this was stored in there as well. And it's this array which is being updated over time here, which gets longer and longer with more and more elements. And this is all JSON data in there, which is why the property names are wrapped by double quotes. It looks like JavaScript, like a JavaScript object, and that's the entire idea behind JSON. It's this JavaScript object notation, but it isn't a JavaScript object. It indeed just looks like it. It is JSON formatted data, because that's what we're doing in the feedback API route. And now with that, we achieved something important. Now in our next application, we are also able to work with submitted data. We're not limited to just returning pages for GET requests. And that allows us to add features like newsletter signup, feedback submission, comments, or any other kind of data that should be submitted maybe. And you don't have to build a separate API as a separate project. Instead, you can easily add API routes your website might need as part of your Next.js project. That's why API routes are a great and very useful feature.